The Legend of Zelda is one of the greatest franchises of all time, and at this point, if you're looking at The Legend of Zelda from Nintendo, at least, they have done something that you rarely ever see for a franchise that is 40 years old or 20, 30 plus years old at the time that they have a super big breakout game. The original Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch was just that game. The series was popular. It was a multi-million seller. People loved The Legend of Zelda, but it wasn't until Breath of the Wild, decades later, after its original release on the NES, that it became super stratosphere popular, blockbuster, massive popular, where it sells not just 10 million units, but 20, then 30 million units, then its follow-up sells another 20 plus million units. You don't see that at all for a traditional core gaming franchise. That's just something that's unique, and very few franchises can do that. But The Legend of Zelda has done that, and that's why this new rumor slash leak tease of The Legend of Zelda getting new details for the Switch 2 has a lot of people talking. Now, we're going to get into this article from Game Rant, and I'm going to give you guys my own personal thoughts on this most recent leak, because I've been around for a lot of different leaks, a lot of different rumors, a lot of different stuff with Legend of Zelda, and a lot of it ends up just being not true, but sometimes some of it does end up being correct. That's why it's really, I would say, important that we look at the source and we look at what's happening here, and then we break down exactly what's being said and the possibilities based off of past ideas and other things. So I want this to be something to where we kind of analyze it from all sides. Yes, we can take it with a grain of salt at this point because it's just a rumor, it is not confirmed, and things often change over time. So you could get information that it ends up not being correct, or they end up taking just a particle of that information. That's happened so many times in the past, as I've covered video gaming now for a decade plus. But let's get into what it has to say here. Shout outs to Game Rant once again for the write-up, and they say the next Legend of Zelda game could make jumping between dimensions a core part of its gameplay. If a recent leak is to be believed, Nintendo has yet to offer any look at the next entry in the iconic fantasy series. But after a string of hits with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and to a lesser extent, Echoes of Wisdom, expectations are high. Now, fans may have their first glimpse at what the first mainline Legend of Zelda title on the Switch 2 could look like. While there are no official details to look at, the next mainline Zelda game could be a turning point for the franchise. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom took the series to new heights and rewrote the Zelda playbook, so any successor on the Switch 2 has some mighty shoes to fill. Nintendo will likely look to shake things up again after almost a decade of the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom version of Hyrule, a process it began with Echoes of Wisdom, and a new leak claims to have some information on what that will entail. Now, the leaker suggests Switch 2 Zelda game could feature cross-dimensional puzzle solving. Now, in a December 27th episode of the Xbox Era podcast, and I see here Jeff Grubb seems to be on this podcast as well, with this nice thumbnail here, co-host Shapeshell Nick went over some cross-dimensional gameplay features that a supposed inside source said will be in the next Legend of Zelda. According to the leak, the Switch 2's first mainline Zelda game will use the same engine as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but with some technical improvements, given the new system's more capable hardware. More interestingly, though, much of the puzzle solving in the game will revolve around opening and pulling things through interdimensional tears. That does seem in line with the franchise's current track, and after Echoes of Wisdom set a new bar for combat innovation, jumping between dimensions could be a logical next step in the series' quest for greater player freedom. Open-ended puzzles that emphasize player choice are one of the core pillars that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom established. Echoes of Wisdom toyed with cross-dimensional themes and gameplay, leaning harder into the idea does seem like a reasonable move for Nintendo amid that trend. Shapeshell Nick offered some specific examples of how this could play out, like leading a charging bull in one dimension to hit a target that unlocks a door in another. In another example, players could fill a room with water, causing a ball to rise to the top of the surface in one dimension, which makes the same obstacle levitate in a different dimension. The idea of multiple dimensions would be nothing new for the franchise, but it sounds like the next Legend of Zelda game could push the concept to new heights in terms of how it impacts gameplay. Whether these examples are accurate or not, many fans do expect Nintendo to swing big with the next mainline Zelda. While the series has reinvented itself a few times now, Breath of the Wild changed the Zelda franchise more than any other title, so the bar is high. As for when fans can expect to get a proper look at the game, Shapeshell Nick said he had no information on a timeline, but that he expects the release to be years away. As with all leaks and rumors, fans should take these with a heavy grain of salt, Game Rant writes. Still, it's exciting to think what could be next for the beloved series. Looking beyond games, the Legend of Zelda movie is set to come out in May 2027, which gives players something more concrete to look forward to. Okay, very interesting write-up and very interesting ideas from Nick over there at the Xbox Era podcast. Now, there's a couple different things that I want to break down first when it comes to the timeline of when we can see this, when it comes to the graphical, technical improvements and other things like that with the game, when it comes to the ideas that are presented in it, because I am a huge Legend of Zelda fan. I do love the Legend of Zelda games. I love Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. I like Wind Waker. I like Twilight Princess. I've been playing Zelda games literally for 30 plus years now. I've been playing pretty much from the beginning, 40 years or something. So I have a lot to say on this. So let's start with the timeline on this. There is a lot of discussion on exactly when Nintendo's going to have their next big Zelda game. I personally feel, which I've stated this before in the past, but I think that it's sooner than maybe what some people will expect. And the reason why I say that is because this new Nintendo management is quite, I would say, ruthless, for lack of a better word, when it comes to getting games out. They know good and well that in order to sell the Nintendo Switch 2, you're going to have Mario, you're going to have Zelda, you're going to have Super Smash Brothers and Pokemon and Animal Crossing and all of these games. That's why they've been so quick to make sure that they ported over all of these games and updated the Zelda games. Link's Awakening, Echoes of Wisdom, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. They updated Super Mario Odyssey. They updated New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. They updated Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. They updated essentially a lot of the popular Mario games and Zelda games right away because they know people need that. Now, obviously, their next big Mario and the next big Zelda is not ready, but the ruthlessness was saying, okay, well, it's not ready here. We're going to hit you with all of this stuff to where you can play the games better, and that can entice Mario and Zelda fans to pick up the Switch 2 now at this point instead of waiting. So you know that they are going to have that next Mario and Zelda as soon as possible. So I personally feel that this strategy was laid into play when they decided not to do Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom DLC. I feel if this game was going to be 5 to 6 years off or something crazy like that, they would have never opted to not have DLC, because they could have done DLC for Tears of the Kingdom and bring it into this generation and have a large-scale DLC pack with all sorts of stuff, which would probably push this next Zelda game even further out. I think the decision was made to start right away working on this next Legend of Zelda game as soon as they said we're not going to do DLC for Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom was essentially done in 2021, 2022 early. However, they needed about 1 year of optimization time in order to make sure that the game did not break on the Nintendo Switch 1, considering it was pushing that system to its limits with the skies and the Hyrule and the depths and everything that that game does in terms of how it loads and how it plays. I think that they said, hey, look, we need to make sure that we get this next Legend of Zelda game as soon as possible, but also give them enough time to make sure that the game is good and not busted and broken and bad and all of that. You don't want a bad first outing for the next major Legend of Zelda. So I think they've been working on this game since 2022 or so. So if you're looking at it, that could be 4+ years, or about 4 years at this point, of development time on this next Legend of Zelda, from pre-production to actual full production and everything. So I do believe that it's probably a bit closer along than expected. And you also have to look at it this way. I doubt Nintendo wants to sit here and make another game that takes 6+ years in terms of Zelda. I think Tears of the Kingdom did, because you're looking at the hardware and trying to get that to work with all the different physics and trying to get that to work overall. I think that's a tall task. But with the Nintendo Switch 2 being several times stronger than the Nintendo Switch 1, I personally feel that that system is going to enable them to be able to develop games more efficiently at times based on what they want to do. Now, Mr. Furukawa did state that, yeah, some games are going to take longer because of the boost in power, but I do think that they're going to compensate with that by making sure that the game isn't some type of massive, huge sky, normal world, and depths. I think that the next Legend of Zelda game is going to be smaller in scale when it comes to what it does with land size, and they're going to really lean upon the next gimmick in the game or the next thing. And if this interdimensional tears and rifts and portals or whatever the case is correct, they're going to lean into that, or whatever they do, and build a really good, I would say, tight atmosphere around that. I don't think they're going to spend a ton of time building all these different locations in the skies and on the ground. That's going to take way more time overall. And if they reuse, of course, what they already have with the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom engine, they can take that, they can build a new art style or new graphics around that in that same engine that's very reliable and very good and is adaptable. Heck, that same engine was used for Ring Fit as well. So you can build different styles of games that look different and play different in there. So I do believe that they're going to go a bit more smaller scale when it comes to land size. They're going to be a bit more traditional when it comes to the layout of maybe dungeons and these different types of areas and locations that you can go to and do things. And they're going to make a tight experience based around that, but with a Hyrule that you can also do some things in, just not going the crazy land size or space, or even, I would say, functionality with the different type of physics that Tears of the Kingdom does, because that game is so advanced in many different ways. I think they're going to go in a little bit of a different direction with the new Link, with the new Hyrule, with the new Zelda overall, and maybe even a new style of Ganon or new type of enemy in that type of sense. So that's what I expect for this one. So I think it could be a 5-year type of development game where it's in development for 5 years instead of 6, 7, or 8, and they announced the game maybe sometime this year and it comes out in 2027. This is the 40th anniversary of the Legend of Zelda franchise overall. There is the movie that's coming out next year, so I would not be surprised if they do announce it. Hey, we're working on the next Legend of Zelda game. Here's a little sneak peek of it, like they did with the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom back in 2019. We're working on this next game that's coming out at some point. So I would not be surprised at all if that does happen with a tease this year and maybe even a release next year. So we'll see about that. Now, when it comes to the technical aspects of this game, I fully expect it to be a beautiful looking and rendered world. Like I stated, with the Nintendo Switch 2, they've got a system that is significantly more powerful and in some ways way more efficient in terms of developing because of the amount of RAM and memory and CPU speeds and certain stuff that they can do. They can plug in what they've had before, enhance it, and make it look significantly better overall. And I think that is the benefit of going from the same architecture to another thing that is the same. If you're looking at what Nvidia did with the Switch 1 and now with Switch 2, they're more comfortable developing HD games. They have multiple games under their belt. They're familiar with what they're doing overall with the architecture. They're not completely starting over like what the Nintendo Switch 1 was. A lot of people don't bring this up, but I will bring it up here. It was very tough going from Wii U Power PC to the Nintendo Switch 1 mobile Nvidia hardware. That's definitely a huge difference in how you develop games. But now they're going off of something that they've already worked with before, and now it's just significantly more powerful. So I do believe that they're going to be able to get more efficiency in developing this game from a technical perspective as well with the Nintendo Switch 2. And this game should look great. Now, I've stated before in the past that the Nintendo Switch 1, the games look great. The problem was just that some of the frame rates and some of the resolution, it just needed a bit more. But overall, when it comes to the geometry, when it comes to how the games would look, they're fine. If you get a system out there that's just a bit more powerful or a good bit more powerful, you can create games that still kind of look like Switch 1, but run efficiently and play great. And that's what we've seen so far with the Nintendo Switch 2. And that's even with Nintendo not tapping into all of the power of the system yet from a first party perspective. So I fully expect the next Legend of Zelda to really push things a lot, but also stylistically be something very attractive as well from a technical perspective. And of course, just from a visual and gameplay perspective as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, there's a lot of things that could happen from down at this point to when Nintendo finally decides to reveal this. So we're going to have to wait for that. But we do have Nintendo Directs coming up. So if you're looking at when this could be announced as well, we have Directs coming up probably in February or March. For those who don't know, Nintendo usually has a early or spring direct, a middle or summer direct, and a end or fall type of direct. And we usually get that direct at the beginning of the year around February or March. So I'd expect something to happen when it comes to that. And I don't think the next Legend of Zelda game is going to be announced there, but I do think that it's a possibility for the summer direct or for the fall direct. E3 2019 was when Nintendo unleashed Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, or sequel to Breath of the Wild, when nobody expected that to even be a thing, considering Breath of the Wild was only 2 years old at that point. So nobody expected that, and then they just unleashed it there. So maybe we get a surprise at some point in the summer or in the fall. So what do you guys think overall about this rumor when it comes to the Legend of Zelda, the next one on Switch 2? What do you guys think about everything that I'd say from a technical perspective and what they can do there, and from the gameplay? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.